liberal democracy is a general colloquial term we use for countries like the United States and our system of governance, and that's what I'm for. Democracy and this idea that majority rules doesn't make sense. As the famous saying goes, a democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding on what's for lunch. A republic is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. There has to be some chance for minority representation, and that's what we have in a constitutional republic with democratically elected representatives. So I like this. And so when I say democracy, if someone doesn't understand the blanket term of what democracy is, they assume you're saying, I want fascism or something, which is not the case. I want a system of guaranteed civil rights, a degree of free market, but I believe there should be government regulation to a certain degree. And I like how we have a system that balances the interests of the minority and the majority in different ways. It's not perfect. It's near impossible to do, but I think we have a great system here.
I'm sorry, just to get this straight, you're against D.C. statehood, against Puerto Rican statehood, against adding states?
No,
because that would be a power play from the Democrats.
No, it depends. So, like, D.C. and Puerto Rico happen to be more progressive, Democratic-leaning now. But if they were Republican-leaning, we could still have a conversation.
Yeah, but you could see how Republicans think it's like an obvious partisan play where they're just trying to get 4 more senators.
Yeah, but the Electoral College is obviously partisan horse crap at this point. It should be, fixed and amended.
So that's why it's hard to take your arguments about democracy seriously when you're.
Why?
Because you don't care about democracy. You're willing to bring in
that's
new
not
states
true
and completely.
At all.
You're
making outrageous.
No, you're willing to
completely.
You're willing to completely upset our electoral system and then stuff it with essentially 4 Democratic senators.
No nonsense. Why are we even look? The original system of the Constitution is deeply flawed. So a tiny state like Wyoming gets 2 senators. A gigantic state like California gets 2 senators. But hold on. I want to finish the point. Let me just finish the point. But in order to fix that, or fix the Electoral College or anything else, you have to go through the process. I believe in the Constitution. So you want to call it a republic? You want to call it a democracy? I'm good with all of that as long as we don't end the Constitution, we don't end our democracy, we don't end our civil rights protected by the Bill of Rights, protected by the Constitution, etc. Then we can have arguments about, hey, do we admit Alaska and Hawaii? Well, Alaska's Republican, Hawaii's Democrat. Let's have that conversation. Do you admit D.C. or Puerto Rico, etc.? That's not anti-democratic. That's just a normal political conversation.
I agree. So just the way that you frame the argument about state senators and stuff like that implies that the number of people in the state matters. Yes, it doesn't matter. It absolutely doesn't because
that's not how in the Constitution.
It doesn't matter because it's not about democracy with that. The senators are supposed to represent the interest of the states, not of the people. The House represent the people. This is something that you absolutely know. And so so the fact that
I don't believe it. I think it's a terrible system.
That's I think it's
I think the Senate is a terrible system.
Then I think that's completely absurd.
It doesn't matter. I'm not going to win on that. Okay. But look, I'll tell you this.
But the fact of the matter is your viewers don't know. They don't understand that the states are supposed to be represented by the senators. And when no, they don't. Not
it's
when
elementary civics. We all know it. We just don't agree. And I guarantee you, if it was flipped, you'd go nuts. If we had tiny little Wyoming that had the same amount of votes as Texas,
because Florida has.
All right, there's Rhode Island.
Yeah, and Florida
I'm with you. But if there was more blue states that were tiny, giant red states,
Ohio's
the reverse of what we have now, I guarantee you, every one of you would be making this is outrageous. Why did this is one man, one vote? How come it's not one man, one vote?
Jake, you're just trying to change the subject and deflect. The point that I'm making is when you portray it as if it's not democratic because it's not popular vote. That's what the House is for. You're misrepresenting what's going on, and your viewers.
I'm not.
I do not care that you say your viewers know. They do not know.
All right, so you made the point. I would say this. Here's the problem: is the 17th Amendment, because Cenk is not necessary. Or if Cenk's view is that the senators are representing the people, that's not wrong since the 17th. It used to be that your state legislatures would appoint people to represent the state's interests, and then we changed it in the early 1900s. I think that's a mistake. I think states should have representation. I'll tell you exactly why. Cenk, do you know about? So I covered the drought in California. It's 10 years ago. We had a drought in California. I went to Tulare County. 300,000 poor people, a lot of migrant workers and farmers live there. I went to these farms and they were drilling tens of thousands of feet down into the earth for groundwater so they could water their crops because the drought had been very severe. I went to the home of a poor migrant family. that they harvested crops. They had no water. They turned their water on, nothing came out. The reason was their wells at their houses only go down 30 feet, but the farmers were drilling down 5 to 10,000 or more feet. So the groundwater had been sucked all up for the farms. So the first thing we thought was, hey, they're stealing the water from the poor workers for their business and their crops. Well, the argument was, yeah, but we have to grow food, otherwise we don't eat. And I said, okay, well, we got to figure something out, right? So I go to the farms and I said, why are you doing this? And they said, we provide a third of the economy of the state. We're producing food. I mean, there's nothing here. There's no workers here unless we can grow the crops. I look over and there's a canal full of water. I said, why don't you just take the actual water that you have that comes from the mountains? And they said, we are a county. This is what I heard from like 7 different farmers. We're a county of 300,000 people. We voted to keep our water. And the cities like San Diego and Carlsbad with golf courses outvoted us. So we went to Carlsbad and we saw golf courses getting watered. They actually, the people who lived there came out and said, we refuse to have brown lawns. We should have the right to water our lawns. Across the street from a golf course with watered green grass was poor migrant workers with no water. And it all came down to, in a system of direct democracy within the state, it was put to a vote. And the cities with majorities said, we want the water for the cities, not for the people where the water came from. I said, that's really interesting. So if you try to figure out a way to balance this, looking at a national level, what happens if you go to a state like Montana that's about to be inducted in a given statehood, and we say, we're going to do everything popular vote? Montana goes, you're going to come in here and you're going to vote to take out all of our water from us. In fact, it happened. Arizona tried suing, file a lawsuit against, I think it was Illinois, to take Great Lakes water. And the only reason it got stopped is because Ontario is a foreign country and it's part of the Great Lakes Coalition. So that would interfere with Canada and international obligations. So Arizona was not able to start shipping water from the Great Lakes, which would have depleted it. So what I end up seeing is, you tell the states, here's what we're going to do. There'll be 2 forms of representation. You're not guaranteed to win. The people may actually vote to take the water and the minerals from your state. But we'll create 2 systems. One, you're a small state, you'll get 1 at-large representative, but you'll have 2 senators. Every state gets 2 senators, and the Senate will be your competing voice, so there'll be some minority representation. Lest we see what happens inside of California, where 2 million people living in an urban center, put it up to a vote. We 2 million outweigh the 300,000. We take all their water, and they did. And those people didn't have any water. So I don't think there's a perfect solution for it, but I think something there works.
So, Tim, I could show you thousands of examples where people get outvoted and it feels like an injustice, and it feels I get outvoted all the time, right? And so it is what it is, and that's not a reason to take down democracy. So what I'm worried about is this dangerous talk of, well, some people don't like what the government concluded, so maybe we shouldn't do majority rule. Maybe we should just let and if I reverse it and I go, okay, maybe we shouldn't do majority rule. You know what? Maybe the Democrats just should rule forever because they're kinder, they're nicer, right?
Let me just ask you.
Of course, we're not going to agree to that, right? I hope you're not going to agree to that.
Let me just.
So why would I want the Republicans to? And every single time people go back to, yeah, but the Republicans should be.
Well, let me ask you one clarifying question. In your view, for democracy, then, would it be acceptable for a major city to vote to take the water away from poor workers?
So it depends on the context, Tim. So like
just the context.
No, for example, the way that California was built in the first place is they brought the water from Northern California to Southern California. Now, in that time, there was enormous corruption. It was a long time ago. And the guy who owned the LA Times is the guy who did the corruption, got profited off of it. But it brought water down to Los Angeles and created one of the greatest cities in the world. So did that water at some point, was it somewhere else in California? It was. Did the people that had all of the water wanted to go down to LA? Probably not. Did they get out? In that case, they were outmaneuvered. But if they were outvoted, I get it. I get why. At the same time, that doesn't mean you leave them high and dry. It doesn't mean that you say, I don't care about you because I just took your water. Who cares? No, you have to compensate them. You have to do all these things. You have to work together. And you're right at your core of saying democracy, but you need civil rights protection. Civil rights doesn't mean for, racial minorities. It means for all of us, for people who are left-wing, right-wing, etc. Because if you have a left-wing government or a Democratic government, and all of a sudden they go, you know what, we decided democracy is no good. We're just canceling the elections. We're terminating the Constitution. We thought there was massive fraud or whatever we thought, right? And so now you guys are a permanent minority. But don't worry, you'll be fine. No, that's not acceptable. It's not. We stick with this system. But again, I'm not as worried about it today because Trump won the popular vote. I was very worried about it when the Republicans kept losing the popular vote and they started talking against democracy. And so that was awfully convenient as you guys lose national vote after national vote after national vote. You go, maybe we don't do democracy. No. Don't mess around with that.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.